Daftaboutcraft, the craft beer podcast.
This is Hannah from Hall Beer Specialists in the Great Western Arcade in Birmingham, and we're the proud sponsors of Daftaboutcraft.
It's December. Christmas is on the way, and this is Daftaboutcraft, the craft beer podcast, episode number 38. Welcome along. You've got me, Dave D, in South Staffordshire.
And me, Dave B.
And he's sitting down there in Suffolk. We have got a real Christmas bonanza, haven't we?
We've not scrimped on guests, hopefully, this time, have we, Dave?
Absolutely not. We've got not one guest, but two guests, and then news of a bonus episode, which may well contain a third guest. How about that? So we'll be starting it off with a chat to Little Brewing. Now, Little Brewing, been going in their current guise since 2020, and they've just released their very first cans. Dave's got a couple to drink. Looking forward to that. And we've also got another guest. Who's that one, Dave?
So we are very pleased to be joined by Tom from Wonder Beyond. Like a couple of other breweries, actually, a few seem to be having birthdays at this time of the year, but Wonder Beyond have turned 5, and to celebrate the fact, they have released a birthday pack of 5 beers. And Tom is very kindly going to talk us through them, and we will enjoy one or two while talking to him. Those who know Wonder Beyond know that the stuff is very strong, so we will only be having one or two in one sitting.
Yeah, well, we've actually got all 5 of these birthday beers, but that might be pushing the boundaries a bit to try and drink all of those. So this will be appearing where Hype or Tripe usually figures, and, well, hopefully these big beers will live up to the name. They've been all over the socials in the last week or so. Lots of plugs for them everywhere, and hopefully we'll be enjoying them. We've also got Sam from Copper Beach, the brewer's wife, along. We've got Tried and Tested, our favourite beer since our last episode. That bonus episode we talked about, it's going to be our cheese and beer pairing, and we thought, because we've already got 2 guests this time and plenty going on, we'd release the cheese special just a few days before Christmas, give you something to listen to over the festive season if you're bored of all the usual things. So cheese and beer will be a standalone episode, and then you've got this one with all the stuff we've just mentioned, and kicking it off as usual with Brew To Me, where we get hold of a beer from a brewery we haven't tried before.
I have got a beer from Oslo Brewing Company. As the name suggests, are based in Oslo. I'd never heard of them, and these beers were in a delicatessen-style food and drink store, which it carries a range of craft. It carries all the local stuff, so there's some Duration and some of the other Norfolk breweries, but also randomly, they have these Oslo beers, and I thought, well, okay, I'm going to try these. I got 2.
Bottles or cans?
Daya-sized cans.
Oh, nice.
Other breweries do 500 mils, but as we've said before, I always think of Daya when I think of 500. So
nice.
I got 2. One's a wit beer, which I'm not having. The beer I'm having is a passion fruit blonde ale, 4.7%. Oslo Brewing Company, they were set up a couple of years ago. I think it's a bit of a collective. The website isn't heavy on the detail, but it looks to be a bit of a collective thing to sort of celebrate. Crikey.
Oh dear, look at that. The headmaster in operation there. That trumps me, that does. Excellent effort.
That was incredibly lively. That can has been upright for a good while, and it still came out like a rocket. But from the froth I was trying to stop from going everywhere, I can smell and taste passion fruit,
nice.
So that's an encouraging sign.
Certainly no carbonation issues there anyway.
No, definitely. That's one of the liveliest beers I've had in a long time. Yeah, just to go back to them. Yeah, they're a small group of people living in and around Oslo with a common love for our city, and together with our friends, we developed the beer we believe in. So it just seems a bit of a collective thing. They've been going a while. I think they've got about 80 beers on tap, so they're not new to it in that sense. They've got bottles. They've got 330s. They've got 440s, and they've got 500ml cans, so they really do the range. And it also looks like they ship to the US and Japan, so they're quite an international-based craft company.
And somehow ended up in a delicatessen in Sleepy Norfolk.
Yeah, which is very odd, but I'm just interested, actually. Now this is interesting. So it makes a bit more sense now. But under their categorisation, they come under as a contract brewery. So they're obviously probably quite big scale. which I guess if you're shipping around the world like that, you're going to be.
So basically here, their recipes are being brewed at other breweries.
Yeah, it sounds that way, doesn't it? Now the head's quietened down a bit on that. I have just had my first sip of it. Now, I was sort of thinking I was going to get, given it's quite hazy, a sort of hazy, pale, passion fruit tasting pale. But the blonde actually makes it, you know, when that passion fruit is sort of a bit sweet and also a bit tart, that kind of taste, it's got that. It's not going toward, it's not quite a sour or anything like that, but it's not really thick and really creamy and really sweet or anything like that. It's actually quite refreshing, I guess, a bit acidic, a bit effervescent, that kind of taste.
Sounds quite nice.
It's not bad. I'm probably drinking it the wrong time of year, I would say. More of a summer beer.
Yeah, that's one for the garden after you've cut the grass and you're sort of kicking back in your deck chair, isn't it?
I think so. But it's pleasant. It's not a world beater, for sure. It sort of retains an authenticity of craft, which is good.
That's the danger, isn't it, when you get some of these contract breweries and it all becomes a bit mass-produced. And
yeah, I don't think it's quite there in terms of tasting mass-produced. It's perhaps not got quite the love and attention of a real micro-brewed beer, but it's more than passable.
Okay.
What have you got?
Right, well, you've got a pretty solid one there by the sounds of it, so let's hope I can do the same. Now, the beer I've got is from a brewery that, not only have I never tried it, I've never even heard of them. It's Electro Brewing, and it's in a bottle, and I just found it on a shelf up here. Can't remember where it came from, but I looked at the bottle and I thought, oh, that looks very European, maybe Spanish or something.
Yep.
Just look them up. They're from Wales.
Okay. I hope the bottle's in date as well, just for the sake of a fair review.
I mean, it wouldn't be like me to have an out-of-date beer knocking around, would it?
No, not at all.
So I've got a beer from Electro, and it is their 808 New England IPA, which is Citra and Mosaic, according to the bottle. So we should know what we're going to get here, shouldn't we? Should be no surprises.
Yep. What strength is it weighing in at?
It is just below 6%, 5.9. Okay. Well, it's not the colour I would expect. I'd expect it to be that sort of thick and vibrant yellow that you can't really see through. What we have here is more of an orangey one with just a little bit of haze. It smells just like you'd expect.
Right.
But for me, there's just a little bit more bitterness at the end than perhaps you would expect from this.
Obviously, everyone's listening, so they don't have the benefit of visuals, but I can tell, as much as you always try and put a positive spin on, I don't think this is a bad beer, but you're struggling to find much to get you very excited.
Yeah, I think sometimes, like on the last episode when I had that New Zealand IPA from Wednesday day, I was really waxing lyrical and there was loads to say about it. But on this one, it's fine. It's not, to coin a Dave B expression, it's not blowing the doors off. It's just a Citra and Mosaic beer that you could happily sit and drink but wouldn't remember in half an hour's time, really.
Which is, I think, probably from the last few episodes we've done, perhaps where Electro are based within Wales, and this beer is available in some local shops around there, and people like it, and it's one, and that's how it earns its corn. Whereas we're probably looking for a bit more sometimes of that beer which transcends just where you are based locally and brewing for the local populace. You want the stuff that's, this could go everywhere. This is great.
Some breweries don't need to get their beer out across the whole of the UK and further afield to make their business a viable concern, do they? No,
if it's working for them, great. And this beer sounds via the medium of Zoom okay, but it doesn't sound like it's amazing. But as you say, not all beers can be.
I would, however, be interested to try their blackberry sour, which I've got listed on their website.
Okay,
So if I see that, I certainly wouldn't be put off getting it, and I would go for it. It's a fine beer, but wouldn't go back to it, but I would explore more from the brewery. Okay, it's time for a chat on the podcast now, and we like to get hold of brewers and breweries we don't know much about. We all know the big names, but we've got hold of a smaller name, in fact, quite a little name. Good evening to Matthew from Little Brewing.
Good evening.
So tell us about the history.
Well, the brewery was started in 2015 under the name Little Over Brewery. Little Over is a small suburb of Derby where we're based. Although the brewery has never been based in Little Over, It was just the spiritual home of the chap that started the brewery off originally. So when we took over 2.5 years ago, we, I guess, didn't really feel any love for Little Over, and we've managed to play on the fact we were a little over the name. So we're now just the little guys, and that's how we became Little Brewing Company.
I sort of said you were little, but you're not that small, are you, actually, in terms of production?
No, we do like to call ourselves the little guys, but we're brewing on effectively an 8-barrel kit, and we high gravity brew to just under 10 barrels, and we're brewing around 3 times every week. Not really that little anymore.
So to put that into perspective for listeners, how many pints would you be turning out each week?
We're looking around 4,500 pints.
So where's the sort of demand for that many pints in the Little Over area and beyond? Because obviously there must be, otherwise you wouldn't do it.
Well, demand is an interesting question. We've got quite a diverse portfolio of beers. Initially, it was a cask-led brewery, and only cask. It was brewing once a week, and a very rigid brew on a Monday, cask on a Wednesday, as I think a lot of very small microbreweries do. The market has changed enormously through the last 2 years, and we just found a lot of drinkers that always been cask drinkers had suddenly had no option other than supermarket beers, and found themselves drinking, heaven forbid, lagers and these fizzy beers in cans, and came out the other end of COVID and thought back at the pub, oh, there's a lot of beer that actually I've tried and I really like. And so we've followed that. We've moved away from bottling. We've put a small canning plant in. We've put fermenters in that we can keg beers, and we're now doing keg beers. I mean, our Pilsner is like a classic Pilsner. We lager it for 5 weeks in the brewery. And so we've not got a massive cask following that we had before, but we've got a much broader following. To whereas we were putting 2 casks into a pub, we might now put 2 casks, 3 kegs, and 5 cases of different cans. That's how we kind of make up the numbers, along with a couple of national wholesalers that help us do a bit of the legwork.
So your cans, I'm right in saying that they're a relatively new thing. You've just released your first cans, in fact.
Yes, we've been canning quietly for the last year, but we've only launched to the public in the last 2 weeks.
That's a very soft launch.
Yes, it is. It is. You only get one go at this. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to mention names, but we can all name brewers who have had cans explode in supermarkets, who have had big recalls, who have had a lot of publicity negatively about, they're cans exploding in people's kitchens. And so we've had cans sat around in the brewery in the coldest places, in the hottest places, in places that get hot in the day and cold at night, across a range of beers. And on a month basis, we've cracked them open, we've had them under the microscope, we've sent them away for testing.
Wow.
We are small. We don't have a centrifuge. We don't have a massive filtration plant. We don't pasteurize anything. So getting it right was really important. And touch wood, we've not had an issue at all. So we're really pleased.
So these cans have literally had the ultimate road test then?
Yes.
Probably with this British summer as well that we've had. You wanted extreme heat and everything. You probably had that.
Yeah.
Wow. There can't be many breweries that go to...
No, it's the first time I've ever heard of this. Such
extremes.
Quality testing.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's a few additional reasons which are not so marketable. We came out of COVID and we've grown. Our keg demand has been brilliant, and that has tied up our carbonation tanks. So we haven't had as much capacity as we want. If we do a canning run, we lose a big slot for a beer that we can sell in like a 10-barrel quantity, but suddenly shifting 3,000 cans of a complete new beer is something we've kind of been very cautious about.
That must be pretty daunting as well.
Well, it's exciting.
That's a better way to look at it.
Yeah.
I mean, at the moment, everything is daunting in brewing. We're looking at a competitive market like we've probably never seen before. Heineken have put the prices up just under 16%. They're putting in flow meters into most of their pub estate, so that whereas before I think pubs could have about 75% of their products tied and 25% free, it's now more 75% volume from what I'm being led to believe. So that's squeezing down the independent trade. And we're experiencing the highest malt cost increase in the last decade, we think.
So, are you glad you did this?
Yes, absolutely.
Good.
Not every day. We fully took over the brewery in August 2020, and it'd been quite a long conversation getting there. But every month is better than the previous month, year on year for us, because all we've known is brewing through COVID and trying to shift an entirely cask business, entirely on trade, into direct to consumer and small pack, and then back again, and then almost back again, and then trying to find the balance of the two. But ultimately, it's a really exciting industry to be in and some lovely people.
So what was your background then? How did you come into this industry? Because if I'm right, your background is nothing to do with brewing, is it?
No, not exactly. I spent 10 years working on ships as an electromechanical engineer. So I'm very technically minded. But before I really came into this, I've brewed a lot more tea than I've ever brewed beer. And I do brew a mean cup of tea, but it's a very technical game. We talk to an awful lot of brewers that we meet, and the more you talk to the good brewers, the more technical and scientific you realise brewing is. There's a lot of people out there that don't have a microscope and don't have a pH meter and are pulling off some incredible beers, but consistency is the absolute key. And if you haven't got that technical brain behind you, I think it's going to be very hard to get any kind of consistency or be able to replicate beers or know why you can't replicate them.
What we have here, Dave, again, is another one of these. We find this so many times. We've said this so much. Somebody with that eye for detail who will go the extra mile, fanatical about what you do.
Fanatical and technically obsessive seems to go very hand in hand with craft brewing. I think there's a lot of people that think, oh, brewing beer must be really easy and you can do a bit fly by night. But then actually, if you want to brew consistently good beer, you've really got to go into the nth degree of things. And it's all the small margins actually really make a big difference when you put them all together.
We've been really lucky. We had a chance meeting with a chap just over 2 years ago who happened to work at the Nottingham University brewing science facility, who said, oh, a brewery your size, you want to get yourself onto the brewing apprenticeship level 4 with Nottingham University. And we thought, well, I think I've done all my schooling really. And what's that going to do? And it's opened us up to the chap that taught us yeast has written 6 textbooks on yeast. His entire life has been spent on yeast. And his entire job is teaching the master's degree course just about yeast. And he's been to our brewery and talked to us about looking after yeast. And the chap who teaches the master's course on hops has been. And we've had a brewer who's been the head brewer at just about every big lager brewery in the world. And he worked with us on the Pilsner. And the more you are exposed to these people, and it's interesting because you say people at a craft level are very technical, but you start to talk to people at Heineken and Carlsberg and Marston's to a degree. And actually, because they only do one beer anyone's heard of, it has to be exactly the same every single time. There's no error. And a lot of the craft world is made up of beers that you only see once. And they're amazing, but you're not always sure whether they know why they're amazing or how they can make them better. And this whole thing of the exposure to the lager world, there's so little room to hide in a lager. And actually, if you get talking to the craft brewers that are brewing lagers, they're the guys that we're kind of really blown away with. I mean, I love a Nipah. It's one of my favourite beers. but there's so much room to hide in it. And even the haze, you put it under a scope, and we're beggars for doing it. We'll buy a can, we'll love it, we'll get another one, we'll take it back and we'll stick it under the microscope, and we'll try and work out, is this a yeast haze? Is this like a protein haze? Is this a haze that they wanted in this way, or is it like an accidental haze? Or
do you do it with, say, a beer? Do you get 2 cans of the same beer or anything like that, just to see if you can pick the differences, if there are any, between 2, even in the same batch or the same run or anything?
So not for looking at differences on that level, because most of the time you'll get 2 cans and they'll be from the same batch. Okay. Even the mobile canners will do a minimum of like 1,200 litres. So the smallest scale kind of commercial canning, you've still got nearly 3,000 440ml cans coming out. So, but from getting one to enjoy.
Yeah.
Although, I mean, you guys must find it. How many beers do you have when you find you're halfway through and think, I'm not just drinking this beer anymore. I'm not just enjoying it. I'm really trying to work out, is that hop I've had before, or what's that flavour? Or
we find it fascinating because you can put 2 beers in a lineup, 3 beers in a lineup with the same hops. They all taste completely different. Yeah,
we've been fascinated about like the different ratios of hopping and the effect of the whirlpool and things like that for ages. And it's not an industry secret or anything, but each brewer is different with it in terms of how much they're sort of either willing to divulge or know what they want to divulge and things like that.
I think hopping it's a minefield. Dead exciting news, like breaking news. I'm on my way at 4 a.m. down to deepest, darkest Devon to pick up a 100-litre pilot kit. It's a perfect replica of our big brew kit. And this is one of the things we're looking at, because currently we use leaf hop in the boil and pellets in the fermenters. And we're looking to move the whole brewery over to pellet.
Which I guess would be more standard in the craft world.
It's a real split, to be honest, because you have to have a whirlpool kettle or some form of whirlpool to be able to use pellet in your copper. And a lot of the smaller, certainly most of the Dave Porter kits, which I think a lot of craft brewers have started out on, are all based on leaf hop, whole cone. But there's a difference in efficiency for the extract or the bitterness and the hop aromas. It gives us a small enough scale that we can play around. And if you alter all the timings, so you can have exactly the same batch of hop, you could put exactly the same quantity in, and throughout the boil, you just change the 5-minute. If you put everything in at 60 minutes, or you put everything, the majority at 60, some at 55, some at 45, you have exactly the same volume of bitterness you can extract, but you'll extract a different amount. You'll have a different finishing hop aroma. There's so many variations to just how you use exactly the same hop to the flavour you get at the end. It makes it really exciting and really interesting.
There's a whole new layer here that we haven't explored a great deal. And I was going to say before, when you were talking about microscopes, in the 2 years plus we've been doing this podcast, and we've spoken to a brewer on pretty much every episode, that's the first time the word microscope has ever been used on this podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Okay. The first thing we were told by this chap, Rod White, the man in brewer lecturing at Nottingham University, I mean, what he hasn't done is kind of, or who he doesn't know isn't worth knowing. And he said, have you got a pH meter? No. Right. Get a pH meter. Have you got a microscope? No. Right. Get a microscope. Is anything else? No. You can do absolutely everything with a pH meter and a microscope, and you carry your pH meter around, and that is the most useful tool in the brewery, more than any other piece of equipment at all.
While we have been talking, I've opened Yoga at 11. Very rarely had any white stouts as well, so I was really intrigued with this to begin with, and I'm even more intrigued now, not only because of the conversation we're having, but also the beer itself. It's got a really different nose, which I can't pin down, because we were talking about smells and taste, and I can't quite get that right in my head as to what it smells of. But to taste, I'm really confused now, because I am basically having a white coffee. I don't necessarily get much caramel, but I'm having a white latte stout, and it's really interesting. So what was the sort of thinking and the brew process behind this beer?
I think a white stout is one of these really interesting styles. I don't know if you've ever been wine tasting and they've given you a glass of red and said, "Oh, what does this smell like?" And you've gone, yes, I'm getting like black currant. And they've said, all right, because this is a Pinot Grigio that we've just put some red food colouring in. You're not getting any black currant. You're getting stone fruit. You're getting a classic dry white wine. So we were trying to brew something that has the bitterness,
yes,
stout, but not hop bitterness.
No.
This is my third version. We had 2 batches that just weren't right, and we brew them alongside our typical stout, which is the Panther of 4.2%, and that's a heavy oatmeal stout. But we didn't want this super, super hazy. Obviously, it hasn't got any chocolate malt. It hasn't got any roasted barley that you typically have to get that. So we had to do it with very neutral hops with a very high alpha content early on in the boil. So we drove off all the aroma and tried to drive off all the hop flavour and just have the hop bitterness left with some sweeter malts to try and get that mouthfeel and that stout body back in.
Which it does. And what was really interesting is, Dave and I have talked about this on previous episodes. I saw on the back of it contains lactose, and I immediately thought, oh, okay, I know how this is going to go. It'll pour out light in colour, fine, I get that. And then what's going to happen is I'm going to get a bit of coffee, and then the milk will come from just the lactose, and that's what I'm going to taste. I actually wouldn't know that there is lactose in that if the can said that. It doesn't taste of lactose. We've had discussions about it. Lactose can be a little bit of a sort of cheat almost, just give that sort of sweet fullness. This is not sweet, but it is full, but it's definitely not for me, the lactose doing it, which is really intriguing.
Yeah, so we've relied on dextrin malt, some Cara malts for the sweetness, and we've actually put the lactose in the boil. Because if you put the lactose into your fermenter really late on, you can get, I mean, some people use it for trying to aid haze stability. You get a lot of body from it, but you will get a lot of sweetness. But we found that if it goes in at the end of the boil, you lose some of that artificial sugar sweetness. And then we condition it for longer. So it comes off the yeast as soon as the beer's finished, and we sit this in the conditioning tank for longer than we'd have a traditional ale to just mellow it.
That all comes through. And that's incredibly complex for, without dumbing it down, a 4.5% beer. That feels like an awful lot of work to go into a beer like that when you feel like a lot of breweries chuck out a 4% beer because it's a 4% beer, if you know what I mean. Yeah.
We only do one beer over 5% at the moment.
Right.
We're doing a few more, and we're not like duty cheats. We're not trying to brew weak beers to not pay higher duty on it. The market as a whole is moving to lower alcohol beers. Our oatmeal stout has won some decent awards. We came silver at SEBA nationally last year for a stout under 4.5%. And we try really hard to get beers that are full of flavour but not high alcohol. Because ultimately, if you go out and you want to have 3 pints, well, you can have, for most people, not a medical recommendation, obviously, you can have 3 4.5% pints, but you can't have 3 5.9% pints. Well, yes.
Well, you could. But no, I completely take your point. Yes, you can. And you could easily have 3 pints of this beer.
What we're saying here is if you want to go out having a few beers, you want something that's complex, full of flavour, but not too strong.
Yeah, and ultimately that's a commercial decision, because as much as I can sit here and say, I've tried really hard to make it 4.5% and not 5, I have tried really hard to make it 4.5 and not 5, but that's because if a customer can go to a pub and drink 5 pints of it instead of 3, well, I've sold 5 pints instead of 3. So the more flavour we can get in to a lower percentage beer, everybody wins, really.
Now, Dave, unfortunately, can't sample the beers just yet because of postal strike.
It's going to be worth the wait, though, isn't it?
Well, this is what I was going to say, because you're enjoying a blackberry sour, which Dave will be itching to get his hands on, but I'd love to hear the sort of process behind a sour and what Dave can expect for that, because how you've talked us through the stout and everything that's gone into that.
Well, this is where your magic pH meter comes in. We actually came about this in a bit of a backwards way. I had a sour from a big brewer last year as part of an advent calendar. And at the end of it, I thought, I need to get to the dentist because I think I've just lost all the enamel on my teeth. And you have that feeling that your gums are coming away from your teeth. And sometimes they are just too sour. And other times you'll have a sour and you think, I don't know if this is sour or this is just a bit stale.
The amount of sours I've had that are not sour at all. They just do not fulfill the brief.
Yeah. So we looked at it and said, okay, well, I want to brew a sour. We have a smallish brew unit, as in I don't have the space to split my fermenters completely apart. And doing a full-blown kind of like wild fermentation is something down the line I'd love to, but putting a massive kind of lacto infection into the brewery wouldn't go down well. So we said, okay, well, we're going to do a kettle sour. And this is a kettle sour. So we sour it and then back into the kettle and boil it to stop the bacteria from souring any further. But to know where to stop, we did a load of trials with some lactic acid in other beers. And we took the base beer that we thought we were going to end up souring and dosed it with lactic acid. We use lactic acid to regulate our mashing liquor. So something that we have on hand, and we dropped it in drop by drop and checked the pH and with a taste panel to make sure that we were hitting it's sour enough, but it's actually really refreshing and it makes you want to have another. And it's that palate cleanser. Yeah, this one's blackberry. So it's got, I think, 15 grams per litre of blackberry fruit in the fermenter. And that's then soured. Once it's down to our desired pH, it's back into the kettle and has a very quick boil to stop it getting any sourer. Then we ferment it out with another yeast to finish the fermentation. People are doing some amazing sours that are completely just like run away. They'll pitch and they'll shut the door and they turn out amazing. But for our first sour, obviously you can see the control freak in me. That
it's really fascinating to see what's involved in producing a beer. You know, we've all done a bit of homebrew in our time, and you get the kit from the supermarket and shove it in the airing cupboard and all this, and it seems relatively simple, but plenty of brewers have explained the scientific side of things to us. But I think I'll be right in saying, Dave, nobody in such detail as yourself.
Yeah, I think either a lot of brewers are stopping a couple of stages earlier, and I don't mean to sort of cast everyone on the same brush, but I feel like you're right in the top 5% of how you're approaching these beers with the process you're taking. I might be mistaken. Like you're talking to more brewers than we are, obviously. Is this sort of an industry-wide thing, or do you feel that yourselves at Little, you're doing that little bit more? Without an intentional pun there.
Yeah, no, I mean, everything we do has a little bit or something. We were a little bit over our old branding and we're a little bit excited about where we're going, and everything is a pun. I guess we've come into this as a second industry. I spent 10 years doing a job that was very rewarding and very technical, but I was away at sea for 6 months of the year. And we've come in and we've thrown more than a little amount of money at getting this going. And we want to take it as seriously as we can. I mean, I've just finished my apprenticeship in brewing, which everybody that comes into work for us is enrolled onto this apprenticeship. Everybody's now going to go and sit their IBD general certificate. And we love to be a craft brewer, but we're taking this really, really seriously. And we know that for every cask that gets sent back, it doesn't just affect the sale of that cask, it affects the whole kind of security of that retail outlet. If you lose the confidence of the publican, you might have lost that income stream completely. And so we're trying really hard to make sure that everything we do is as correct as we know about, and we don't have any surprises. And part of putting this new little kit in is we can hopefully turn out more exciting beer. I mean, more exciting than the exciting beers we're already doing, but more often. Yeah, because ultimately it's a commercial brewery. It's not a hobby. We love it. I hope that comes across. We absolutely
does.
But we're tiny, but we have our big kit, and that's our commercial income stream. to be able to check out 200 cans every kind of 20 days of something crazy that's the really exciting bit. That's the
bit that keeps people like us happy.
Yeah. Currently having our subscription boxes designed. We're launching a subscription service in the new year, all on the back of this, because we can now, without interrupting our main kind of throughput and not turning out 4,000 cans of the same beer, we can put out small batches and we can launch a really exciting subscription service in the new year. And
tell us more about the subscription box and how's it going to work and what's going to be in it.
Well, I can't tell you what's going to be in it, other than
or how much it will cost.
A little bit of beer heaven. There's lots of bits to be worked out because we want to offer the best deal, but people like Royal Mail throw a horrible obstacle. Can only send 2 cans less than a litre each. Now, we're not going to be selling litre cans. We can't fit them in our SEMA. We were hoping to do 3 cans going out at a time, which is then on to parcel courier. And until we're sending 300 packages a week, every week, we're on the same price as everybody else, which is our hurdle at the moment. So we're in talks with a couple of parcel people, or we might end up moving to a 2-can on a more regular basis. So you get 2 cans every fortnight instead of just a delivery every month, which I think is nicer, but that brings a logistical...
Yeah, you'd almost never be off the wheel for that, would you? Because if you've got to keep going every fortnight, that's just, it's never going to stop, is it?
I mean, there's 4 of us in the brewery at the moment. We don't want it to become just work. We've got a stack of recipes, but we want it to be fun. We want to be brewing them because we're still excited and not, right, who's going to brew today? Because we've got to brew today. And if we don't, the whole model falls down and it just becomes work. That's what the big kit's for. The big kit's for work.
Yeah. The small kit's for the fun stuff.
Yeah.
So you said there's 4 people involved. So there's you. Who else have we got?
So myself and my dad, Nick, we were the guys that took over from the chap that retired. And then one of my best friends, Emma, who came from a local cask-only brewery. And then a friend who has come over from a mixed keg, cask, can brewery. And at the moment, he's mainly taking care of the logistics side. Emma's taking care of the office, the sales, making sure we've got enough of everything in.
We've obviously talked there about the subscription service. A lot of the time when we speak, the question usually is, do you want a brewery tap? Because that seems a really sort of good model for business. Is that something that you're after as well or would entertain?
Absolutely. I had a bar sort of separately for the past 4 years, which we sold out of just in the summer this year because the two were experiencing growth that was kind of stifling each other. There wasn't enough of me to go, and I would probably guessed I kind of like to have a bit of a tight grip on the direction of everything. So we let the bar go to a much more relaxed, solely focused on the bar individual. So Andy's now running the bar, which is doing brilliantly. The problem is we've got such a small unit. We've doubled the size of our cold storage this year. We've put another 2 conical fermenters in. We've stuck a mezzanine in to try and squeeze a little bit more space. We've got big plans for a tap, but every time we say, right, do you think we can open this month? We go and buy another piece of kit that just... I mean, I'd love for you to both come up to have a look. But our tap room was a decent size, and we're now down to about 4 meters by 2.5 meters. Which...
Any outside space you can utilise?
Yes, but it's not a great time of year. So we are ready. This small pilot kit is still 2.5 meters by 1.8 meters. So it's taken a chunk of space up. And we'll probably need 2 more fermenters to go with that. So we've probably lost another 2 square meters. The tap room's getting pushed back a little bit.
With the bar, you've certainly got the experience that would go with a tap room.
Yeah, I think there are 2 enormous positives to a tap room. Everybody sings the praises from you're selling beer at a consumer price, so your margin is fantastic. But as we found with the bar, I think the best thing about having a tap room is you can put out a very small trial product and get actual feedback without it affecting your commercial value. You're not sending it to a pub and getting feedback from people who you're not really sure if that was the feedback or if it really went down well, or once that's out, that's gone. But you put it on at your tap and you go, pilot trial. My sour might be someone else's double IPA.
Yeah.
You know, I love a sour, but some people can't stand them. I love a hazy beer, and some people think it's the devil's work. It should be poured down the drain, or maybe it's come from the drain. And that's one thing that we're finding really hard, or I guess I'm finding really hard, is I do brew some beer. It's not my favourite, and it's hard to say that. So who am I to kind of determine what's a good beer?
I suppose you have to view that beer from a personal perspective, though, is if I don't like brewing this beer, but everyone else does, and people enjoy tasting it, that's good, because hopefully I can get them onto the other beers, and also it helps me be able to brew the other beers, because if they like this, and this almost sort of, if this is a bit of a leader, this funds being able to do the experiment and perhaps hit on something else everyone will like. So one hand washes the other eventually.
Absolutely. It's really good, because if you brew something you don't like, you become very subjective on all the flavours. And I'd probably say that beer is that's our perfect beer. There's no room on it, because it makes you, I think having a beer you don't like technically makes you a better brewer overall.
Here's a question for you on a totally different subject. When you're not drinking your own beers, that's a fascinating question, actually, given the chat we've had. I'd love to know whose beers that you would enjoy.
So this is this pains me. And I'm not sure how to answer it. I'm sure you two have a guilty pleasure beer, and there are times when you go to a supermarket and you just want just a bog standard, best bitter, traditional cask ale. This time of year.
Let the man finish, Dave. Be nice.
No, I'm finished. Yeah. For everyone listening, you can't see the look of disgust I've just had.
No, I'm not. Look, people can drink what they want. That's fine with me. Go on.
Someone's best bitter is another man's double IPA. We've just
absolutely. Yeah. Go on. What is it then? What do you like to drink?
Well, Theakston's.
You could have given me a million guesses. I never would have thought you'd say Theakston's.
If I'm in a pub and there's a normal toss-up, your Green King, your Pedigree, your Tim Taylor's. Tim Taylor's is fantastic.
Now, Landlord, I could assume why you would say that, given everything we've said, because I find if I go anywhere, bottle or on cask, Landlord stays the same. Theakston's just surprises me, because I just never would have pegged it.
Their best bitter it's a very light, and I wouldn't describe it as a traditional best bitter. But there's something very refreshing about it. There are so many craft brewers out there that have amazing flavours, and you're left with this hop burn taste. Actually, sometimes just a mainstream, boring old best bitter is actually really refreshing.
I can see where you're coming from with that. I
can switch off with it. I'm not looking for the hops. I'm not looking for anything hidden. I'm not looking for how thick it is. What percentage of oats have they used in this? How have they got that mouthfeel? Is that dextrin malt for that, or is that oats, or is it wheat? Or I wonder if they're just in at a different temperature. It's just crack it open, sit there,
drink,
and I'm back to enjoying a beer.
It's nice that you can find a beer that will enable you to do that. Forget about everything you know about beer, and you can just sit there and drink it for what it is.
Yeah. I mean, it's probably the wrong answer. I mean, I'm in Derbyshire.
I don't know. I think that's a really interesting answer. I think I think out of context, it makes no sense. But actually, when it feeds into everything we've talked about so far, and you sort of saying about, actually, for all the flack that, Heineken having however many mentions they've had in this conversation, which is more than I expected. But actually, when you think about it, they have to nail their beer every time without fail across the world. It actually makes a lot of sense that you would seek and enjoy what that actually is as a feat, but also just, it's not going to do anything amazing. I don't need it to. I actually would just like to have a beer where I don't have to think.
Yeah. I have friends that work at Heineken at the Tadcaster plant, and I've been round, and they're brewing 10 times a day, 7 days a week. And in every brew of those 70 brews, they're mashing in more than we mash in annually.
Wow.
Wow.
So we think, oh, we're doing all right. And then I pop up to see my friend, and she says, yeah, you see that tank? Yeah, that's your annual production in that. So we are tiny, and we're never going to take over the world, and we're never going to be. I think there are going to be fewer and fewer craft brewers selling out or being bought out. Every craft brewer says, I never want to sell out, and every craft brewer wants £100 million. Don't get me wrong. But that's not going to happen. It's going to get more competitive. And I think for craft beer to survive, we almost have to be more Heineken-minded. If we can't nail the technical process, and we do have more craft brewers having issues on like cans recalled or just beers that have really gone wrong and are publicised, people will lose the faith in the whole craft industry, and it'll get pushed out again. Craft beer is expensive. There's no way of hiding it. We don't have the economies of scale that the big brewers have. I've heard numbers of how much Sharps can turn out a cask of Doom Bar, and it's just disgustingly low. And we can never compete with those big brewers. So we have to make it about the overall experience. We have to provide the right glassware. It has to be perceivably worth what you're paying for. And
yeah, if Doom Bar's £2.50 a pint somewhere, you've got to absolutely justify why you are going to be double the price.
But I think even in some instances, the taste isn't quite good enough. It has to be the experience, because why are they going to get a subscription pack from me when they can go to a supermarket and get what is branded as their craft section? Well, I don't want to offer people the supermarket's experience. I want them to get home from work and have this little box of excitement that will brighten their day and go, oh, yes, I've been waiting for this.
I love that description, a little box of excitement. That is brilliant. And that's what it is. I do a couple of subscription services, and I look forward to the day when they land. And others I've subscribed to, they didn't hit the mark, and I don't subscribe anymore because they didn't hit the mark. I wasn't excited when they turned up. If people do want to get hold of your beers, how can they get them?
So at the moment, if you're close to the brewery, and I say close, we're offering a 5-mile hand-delivered service at the moment because we've just had so many issues with couriers and cardboard boxes. Who ever knew there were so many different types of cardboard? I can bore you now because I've looked into. I'm looking for an EB if you're ever looking. Corrugated cardboard, single layer, double layer, triple layer, and then you can specify the size of the flute for each layer, for its impact resistance from the inside, from the outside. We have the wrong type of cardboard to ship anything at the moment, and it doesn't survive any kind of drop test, so we can't post anything at the moment. We're really, really trying to correct that. But at the moment, you can come to the brewery and pick things up, or we can deliver it within a 5-mile radius of Derby. But go to the website, littlebrewing.co.uk, and all of our updates will be on there. As soon as we have any shipping, we'll be on there. Follow us on Facebook. Everything is Little Brewing, Instagram, Facebook, and we're shouting about everything we can, including our woolly hats, which are going on after this.
They look tremendous, by the way.
Yeah, that was my next question. The woolly hats.
Yes,
I could basically buy all of them.
Now, the woolly hats are postable. We can send you woolly hats anywhere.
Well, that has been a thoroughly entertaining and massively informative chat. I enjoyed that.
I'm obviously incredibly passionate about this. And
when we talk to people, when you can tell their passion coming through, that we love that, don't we, Dave? That's what we love to see, and well, it's obvious.
This has been one of the most educational chats I think we've had in a long time. It's been fascinating from start to finish. So for that, thank you. And I can't wait to see where you're going with this, because it feels like perhaps it could be 2023 once you get the right cardboard, could be your year.
Thanks for having me.
Daft About Craft, the craft beer podcast.
Right, it's a time of the podcast where we get Sam from Copper Beech Brewing Company in Kidderminster in Worcestershire to join us. She's here. Happy Christmas, Sam.
Merry Christmas to you and all of the listeners.
Thank you very much. We get you on each time to give a different perspective, a perspective from the brewer's wife angle, what it's like to be married to somebody in the brewing industry. And you like to bring us different stories. What have you got for us this time?
Well, actually, Dave, I'm going to need your help telling this one because you have first-hand experience of this story. You were there. So yeah, just to set the scene, Dan is upgrading his brew house for what are we on now? The 4th time?
To be honest, there's been so many upgrades, I've lost track, really.
Same. And I think the last one didn't even get used, did it? It got built.
And then sold.
Ready to go and then immediately sold to make way for this new kit. So the sort of boring side of it is that he'd ordered a piece of equipment that for one reason or another didn't make it to the brewery. And in the meantime, while he was looking at what to do otherwise, he made a contact at a lovely venue in Worcester, really good little drinking spot, isn't it?
It is.
The Oil Basin. And the guy that runs that patch, he had some brewing equipment that he'd acquired and was sort of selling on. So Dan and I went to look at it, and Dan was very excited, like a child on Christmas morning.
Anything shiny gets him going, doesn't it?
I just think this was like the brew kit of his wildest dreams, to be honest. I think it's bigger than he anticipated being able to have at this point as well. So that's fantastic. So yeah, obviously these are, do you remember the literage? They're unitanks, aren't they?
I know they're heavy. I know that. They're significantly bigger than what he had.
Basically,
anyway.
what we had initially just looked like giant saucepans, and someone even asked us if we were making curry once.
So basically, he got hold of these to future-proof the business somewhat.
Essentially, yeah. So they were in the sort of back room of this pub, and Dan, being one man, cannot lift or remove them himself. So obviously he's called in the troops, you being one of them.
I noticed you weren't available on this day, Sam.
Yeah,
you were
funny
busy
that.
this day.
Listen, I have got absolutely zero upper body strength. I would have been no good to anyone other than bossing you all around. So I think it's probably a good job I wasn't there, to be fair.
So Dan asked me to go and help him move these unitanks out of the back of this pub. And with the help of Sam and Patch there, we did this, but...
Not me, Sam.
No, another Sam. So we did this, but only after we had to drain the contents of one of these tanks because we thought there was nothing in there, but turns out there was something in there.
Well, Dan said, obviously, you got the first two out, not too much trouble. And then he went to sort of do whatever with the third, and he went, this is pressurised?
Yeah.
And Patch said, well, what does that mean? And he said, it means there's something in there.
Yeah. And then this sort of smell started leaking out, which... being nice, we could say it was like a mixed firm kind of smell.
Oh, nice. So how did we decide how long we thought the contents had been in there?
2 years.
2 years. So, yeah, just to give some context behind that smell. 2 years worth of some sort of brew. And did you decide what you thought it was?
Well,
tell him what it came out like, look, and how you got it out.
The bottom of this tank was absolutely clogged with this stuff. It wouldn't come out. We had to hose it out, we had to fire water into it to get it to come out, and eventually it started, we put enough water in there that it started just leaking out, but it looked like the contents of about 1,000 babies' nappies all just seeping out bit by bit. I wish I'd have videoed it because it's one of those sort of TikTok things that would go viral. You know, people like watching pimples being pops and all this sort of stuff.
I'm not one of them, but yeah, I know that's a thing.
It was a bit like that, and it kept coming and coming and coming and coming. I thought, is this ever going to end? And it was bucket after bucket after bucket of this liquid. And I'll let you carry on the story from there. What we called this liquid.
Yeah, so Dan came home and obviously was retelling the story to me, and he's got a picture. I don't know if he sent you that picture. You could always put it on your Insta for the viewers to have a look at. But he said, just look at it. It looks like a giant bucket of gloop.
So then we thought, gloop. That is an excellent name for a beer.
And obviously our beers, for those who don't know, are all named after experiences that we've had in our lives. And we always put a QR code on the back, which leads to a web page which will tell you the story of how that beer got its name.
So this is like a sneak preview. You're getting the QR code story here before this beer's made, because
before it is in existence. Because we don't even know what it is yet.
It doesn't exist. We don't know what it's going to be. But when it comes, this beer will be called Gloop, and I can pretty much guarantee you that it will smell and look a lot better than that stuff that was in that tank for 2 years.
It certainly won't look like the contents of 1,000 babies nappies, as Dave so eloquently put it there.
But if you ever wondered how beers get their names, I imagine that, every brewery has got a story like this to
there's
tell.
got to be so many obscure, there are so many obscure names, aren't there, of beers? And I think that's kind of when we were talking about our branding. I said it really bugs me when I don't know why it's called. I really want to know the story behind the name. So, guys, look out for Gloop in the future. And also, if you're from the Worcestershire area or you're coming this way, check out the Oil Basin and you might get a pint of it on draft. You never
might
know.
do.
Get in touch with us on Twitter and Instagram at Daftaboutcraft1.
So it's time on the podcast now for the section that we call Tried and Tested, where we look at the beers we've been drinking over the last few weeks and pick our favourite one. And I'll kick it off here. I have an invitation to the opening of a new bar, the new North Bar at Snow Hill in Birmingham. It was a bit of a launch night for them. There was lots of craft beer people there, lots of people from the industry, lots of people there from local breweries in Birmingham and around and about. So it was nice to have a good chat with lots of people and drink lots of beer. And the beer that I really enjoyed the most while I was there was an Imperial Stout, a 10% Imperial Stout called Endless Ends. They describe it as a robust and warming Imperial Stout made with specialist malts, indulgent adjuncts and festive spice. And it was spot on. It was a cold night when we were there and this really warmed you up on the inside. It was a really, really good beer. A great Imperial Stout from North. Their new bar at Snow Hill's going to be a good one. It's very reminiscent of some of their bars in Leeds. A really good atmosphere, lovely vibe, and lots of nice beers as well. So that's the new Snow Hill bar at North. Now, I was out and about on my travels there, but not too far, only to Birmingham. But Dave has been going out and about as well. And in fact, he sent us this message.
So my tried and tested actually comes all the way from Belgium, which is where I am. This is a bit of a recorded message, doing something a little bit different, but I'm actually in Bruges for a couple of days, just a whirlwind trip, which is all you really need for this place. It is brilliant, but it is also crammed full of beer, and there's always the opportunity to find new stuff here, which I've managed to do, and I have enjoyed the most a beer called Charbon. I'm not going to embarrass myself and try and pronounce the Belgian brewery's name, but it's Charbon, Charbon, and this is a 7% dry stout, but it's got some smoked malt in here, and listeners will know that I do love a good smoked beer, and this is exactly that. This is a smoky stout. It's not that heavy, even though it's 7%. The tasting notes say it should get some vanilla in it, but I don't get that, but I don't care, because the smoke is perfect. It's just a really nice beer. I've had it in a place called Cafe Rose Red, which I'd highly recommend if you ever do come to Bruges. It's a great little venue, and I'm also going to make sure that I come back with at least one bottle of it, as there's no end of places where you can buy the beers as well, and the prices are brilliant. So that is my tried and tested Charbon, all the way from Bruges, and hopefully you can either get out here or find it in and get hold of it as well.
There you go. Look, Dave beat all the way from Bruges. Getting out and about on Daftaboutcraft. Now, if you'd like to let us know what you've been enjoying drinking recently and what you're going to have over the festive season, don't forget to get in touch on our socials, Instagram, Facebook, even Twitter. Find us on all those platforms, Daftaboutcraft1, and we'd love to hear from you, of course.
And now it's time for Hype or Tripe.
Now, when you hear this music on the podcast, you know what's coming up. You know it's Hype or Tripe, how we traditionally end our episodes, where we get hold of a beer and we see if it's Hype or Tripe. Now, a little bit different this time, because if it is Tripe, it's going to be a bit more tricky to say so, because we've got somebody with us to talk us through not just one beer, but a couple of beers. Welcome to the podcast, Tom from Wonder Beyond in Manchester. How you doing, Tom?
Hi guys, it's lovely to be here. It's lovely to be invited on, and again, I hope you don't hate the beer.
We won't. Well, we have been known to hate some beers. Sometimes they are tripe, and we have to call it how it is. But I've got a good feeling about these. These beers are Wonder Beyond's 5th birthday beers, and you've released them recently, a set of 5 collabs with different breweries.
So the project's kind of been almost a full year in the making. The Finback collabs has been 4 years in the making.
Wow.
Because we just keep missing each other every time they come over or we go over to the States. And the Pomona beer, well, we've been mates with those guys pretty much in the entire existence of the brewery, so it's always good to team up with them. And yes, so 5 different beers, a dipper with Chain House up in Preston, a tipper with Finback, a sour with Arpus from Estonia, a Imperial Stout with Lervig, and then a beer that you guys requested to have it on it, which is the one with Pomona, 13% Imperial Stout.
Big beers, and this is kind of what Wonder Beyond is known for, isn't it?
Outside of Manchester, we're very much known for these beers, but our best-selling beer by far is our 3.8% cask pale. We do 4 brews about a month. We sell 220 casks of it, but we sell it to the same accounts that have been buying off us for the past 5 years. It just works for us. We probably do about 50% of the beers are above 8%, when about 50% of the beers are below. But again, like what I was saying, like 50% of them don't tend to go outside of Manchester, maybe Liverpool, maybe Sheffield.
Yeah, I was going to say, I've already learnt something there, that your most popular beer is a cask pale. I never ever would have thought that.
No.
By volume, it's quite a substantial difference, yeah.
So obviously that sort of maybe helps keep you doing all the other bits, or do the two sort of work with each other?
I think it very much works together. The reason that we kind of do peak is that we're all cask beer drinkers, really, and so it was our 5th ever brew. Was the first batch of peak, and it's just been a consistent part of our entire portfolio ever since. But then we started to do like the mad fruity stuff and the mad imperial stouts. There was a period of almost 2 years that we didn't brew anything less than 10% during lockdown, because people were going absolutely quiet. But then, of course, when the pubs reopened, then people just wanted that pint of 3.8%, 4.5%, and we very much saw the needle swing in the other direction. We are, of course, still known for our 10% stuff, and we are incredibly proud of it. It does kind of desensitize you, though. So, like our 8% birthday beer, the dipper, we describe as the session one of the 5.
Please don't try and session an 8% dipper, anybody.
No, absolutely, please. That is not a recommendation for anyone. But it is, like, it does desensitize you. We've got our core range, if you want to call it, is a lager, a 3.8% pale and a 4.5% hazy, and a 12% milkshake IPA, a 10%. I don't think there's many breweries that kind of do such a wide
That's
range
interesting.
is what we kind of do. And we are tiny. We are a 3.5 man operation on site. We also have our incredible Tina, who does all of our artwork. She's based out in York, but we're a very incredibly small team and small operation.
It is amazing how consumers out there, people who drink your beers, get a different idea of the brewery. We think, oh yeah, they're really big players, are up there in Manchester with all the other big lads, and we just think you're big. But it's fascinating to realise you're not at all.
On site, you've got me, who does now all the operations and all the sales. You got our head brewer, Matt, who does all the brewing. You've got our long-suffering brewery assistant and taproom manager, Dave. And that's it, really. The main owner, Dan, who splits his time between Manchester and Antwerp. He does all of our exports. And that's it. Like, that's the team.
We're learning so much, and we haven't even tried a beer yet.
We need to open a beer, don't we?
We're all very tired all the time.
Yeah, I bet you are.
So, like, it's a lot of work. Because we're such a small team, you can really see every single decision, every single ounce of effort you put in makes a difference.
You must love what you do as well.
I'm only 16, and it's just been very hard life. Really, it's really taken it out of us. I've been doing this now for coming up to 10 years working for breweries. Before I worked for Wonder, I worked for Anarchy up in Newcastle. Before that, I was head of sales for Brew York. Before that, I was a bio and organic analytical chemist. So I've had a bit of a segue. But then it's like our head brewer, before he started and founded Wonder, he was one of the guys behind Hop Studio over in York, which was a very quite traditional cask-based brewery. And then before that, he was a sound and lighting engineer. So it's kind of funny where people come from.
Yeah, I've just opened my first beer.
And I have as well. And we'll get to yours in a minute, Dave, if we go up in strength slightly, because I am sessioning slightly because I'm getting older and I went out on Saturday night and I still appear to be recovering slightly from it. I'm very tired. So I've actually got the Dipper. I've got Gordian Pretzel, which is the collab with Chain House Brewing. So what was the thinking behind the process and what you wanted to achieve with the Dipper?
So Ryan, who runs Chain House, is like a really, really small operation. He's just been going out of his garage for the past, I think, 2-3 years, just producing some of the best hazy pales, I think, in the Northwest, up there with the guys such as Pomona and Ribby, who are doing absolutely insane stuff. He's just started to do a little bit of canning, and he's just started to do a tap room. So he's really good. And it was one of those that when we were punting these ideas around of who we want to do our 5th birthday beers with, we were really kind of pushing for the big guys. But then we went to Track, had a festival that we were pouring at called Welcome to the Neighbourhood. Me and Dan, who's the owner, went over for that and drank a load of Ryan stuff, and it was just incredible. Turned to him there and went, we're doing these 5th birthday collabs. Do you want to come down? And he seemed really honoured, and it was kind of touching. But going places, that guy, like, he's absolutely going to smash it. And so it kind of spread out from there. Like, the track guys know him really well, and we're, of course, because they're about 100 metres away from us, we're good mates with them as well, and they talked so highly about him. So we did Dipper with him. So this is using an experimental hop, which is HBC 638. So you'll get a little bit of mint to it, a little bit of lime. Yes. It's quite an unusual taste, but we're using our main favourite hop in this, which is Nelson Sauvin, which we put in probably about 75% of our beers. We absolutely love that hop.
And that comes through definitely on the back end, the Nelson Sauvin. I get that limey bit. I haven't had any mint. I was a bit surprised because I opened it, had the first sip, and I thought, it's going to be quite, if it's Chain House, I think, and you guys, it's going to be big and fruity, and it is to start, but it's a different kind.
It's very smooth as well.
Fruity, but it's not like the sort of haze juice bombs of 4 years ago, and yet it's not super DDH bitter. It sits somewhere nicely in the middle, and it is really sessionable as well.
Really sessionable. So when we had our birthday, people coming in and just necking pints of it and going, this is a great 5%er. And it's it's 8%. It's 8, just so you know, it is 8%.
I'd never guess this. I would have this off a tap blind and I'd be, 5, 6, absolute top.
So who brought what to the table in this collab? I always like asking this question. It fascinates me who does what. And
so Ryan brought the hops sort of choice and the water treatment. He was actually ill when we were meant to be brewing it, but we only had one slot, and he was so cut up about it as well. We're going to go up to his and do kind of an entire event at his new tap room very shortly. And the most important thing he brought is, of course, his cats, which are on the label, which is Gordian Pretzel.
Awesome.
But yeah, anyone, if you find yourself in Preston. Some amazing places in Preston. You've got The Orchard, which is an incredible craft beer bar. You've got Guild Ale House, which is a great independent cask bar. You've got Plough, Plug and Taps, The Continental, which is an old hotel completely free of tide, and you'll have some of the most weird and wonderful cask you'll ever have in your life. It's actually worth it.
You're selling it.
Actually sounds a really good night now.
There's like 5 or 6 really good. Winkley Strait Ale House as well. That's reopening under it. That was bought out by the staff, and so it's going to be run as a cooperative. Last time I heard, that might have been changed. And you've got Nico's as well, which specialise in Balkan beers.
Wow!
So a lot of beers from that area of the world, which I didn't realise how many incredible breweries were coming out of that area.
Which takes us on to the beer I've just opened, which is an 11% Imperial Pastry Sour in conjunction with Arpus. Now, I opened the can a couple of minutes ago, and that nose hits you straight away. Even with the can 2 feet away from you, you can smell what's going on there.
This is probably my favourite of the 5 beers. I think the best is the Finback, but I think this is my favourite, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
This was born at a festival called Haze Fest over in Finland, which is run by our Finnish importer. So our owner, Dan, he went over and he was placed next to the guys from Arthur's. They're big fruity sours. I've just always been absolutely exceptional, just incredible. And so we kind of got in contact with those guys again. we just sent them the message out of the blue, kind of going, if you're in the area, we don't want you guys to have to fly over specially. But if you guys are about, and they went, well, actually, we're in the UK this week and we're passing through Manchester on Thursday.
Oh, wow.
Have you got time to brew? And it was like,
yes.
Yeah, we absolutely no worries. The recipe for the fruits was completely them. Actually, our first ever pastry sour. So we've, of course, known for using quite a lot of lactose in our beers, but you might notice that all 5 of these birthday beers are actually vegan completely. We're sort of moving away from that. We're doing longer boils, using maltodextrin as well.
Yeah.
Trying to find that balance for certain beers that we just don't think we'll ever be able to lose lactose from. Milk stouts, for example, are probably a big one. And milkshake IPAs.
Am I getting some vanilla there as well?
So you're not getting vanilla, so we're actually adding maple syrup to this.
Oh, okay.
So a little bit of a brewer's trick here. Most of the time, if you see maple syrup on their label, they're using fenugreek, which when you ferment it, smells and tastes exactly like maple syrup. The main reason is because maple syrup is completely fermentable. So when you're pouring maple syrup in it, all that you're doing is just adding another 2-3 percentage points and not really achieving anything. But this one we actually used just pure maple syrup in it. We boiled it and we hoped that would denature it so it wouldn't be able to be fermentable. And I think we've managed it very well with this, but it just gives that little bit of sweetness on that back end.
I tell you what, Dave, if you thought your 8% dipper was drinkable, this is 11% and it's very drinkable. I was thinking I might have to share this can with my other half. There's no need.
She's not going to look him.
No, it's really good. And the colour is something else, isn't it? Wow.
Oh, yeah. On draft, the head pours this thick red-purple colour. It was meant to have a ton of mixed berries in it. It actually only had 980 because we dropped one bag.
The journey of Wonder Beyond is interesting. So how did it start off 5 years ago, and how different was it then to what it is now?
So it started out with Dan. So Dan's mum is Jan, who owns Marble. His dad owned a couple of pubs around Manchester. The famous one is the Knot Bar. And so he did maths at uni. I did chemistry. We sort of knew each other. We've got lots of mutual friends, but we never properly met. So he went, well, I'm going to follow in the family trade. I'm going to become a brewer. So he started up Dan's Brewery, which he will admit is a terrible name. He kind of went, no, let's do this properly. And so he got Tina in to do the design, and Matt, our head brewer, to come in and help him brew to begin with. And it kind of developed from there. I think the main catalyst for how we've ended up now was when we went into cans. Then started doing the fruity sours, and then export started to love it. People started to notice.
The export thing, is that pretty big for you guys then?
I'd probably put it as a third. So a third of our stuff is direct, mainly Manchester, Liverpool, Sheffield, a little bit to York. About a third of it is wholesale, and about a third of it is export. Sometimes it's larger, sometimes it's smaller, but I'd say it probably averages out about that-ish. I think because of the specialist sort of beers that we do, it really does work well with the export market.
Yeah.
Started working with some far-flung places, so Singapore, Japan, Australia. Singapore take a lot to say how tiny a country they are. Thailand as well, South Korea.
You're exporting these big beers all the way around the world now at these huge ABVs. Something I've been dying to ask is Wonder Beyond used to do really small cans of these big beers. And I think, and Dave and I have talked about this at length, I think that's a great idea, and I'm surprised.
We also think it's a great idea. The issue that we had, we can't get them anymore. So we contact our can supplier, which is a company called Osterhouse, which is down in Rotherham. It's kind of the guys who, I'd say 50%, 70% of the market use for the cans. And they put us in contact with their distributor from Australia, who put us into their manufacturer in Taiwan, who put us to the actual manufacturer in Thailand. They went, you're more than welcome to get these, but you have to buy an entire 40 foot of them. So that was 36 pallets.
Oh, what a shame. I think it's a great idea if it can ever be revisited and like if distribution gets easier or something, because I think there's a huge potential there to get those to have on your own rather than always feeling. I mean, obviously you can all drink a 440, but
I would love to see the 330ml bottle become more and more widespread again. I think it works. And the Tartarus guys are really pushing it forward and making that a premier sort of substance, and even the guys such as like Thornbridge have done it, and even the guys over at Vocation have started to do those 330ml special releases. And I'd love to do that, but the bottlers, it's still being seen as almost a negative.
Yeah.
Unless it's 750ml.
Yeah.
I do think the market is changing, and I think we'll get there relatively soon. But I think we're a little bit way off yet.
So, Wonder Beyond 5 years old. What's going to happen in the next 5 years then? Hopefully you'll survive, because it's a horrible climate out there at the moment.
Well, we've just taken delivery of a load more barrels. January is always a dire month, I think, for the entire brewing industry. So we're just trying to push through that. So by having the barrel project running at kind of full tilt, we've got, I think, last count, we've got 94 barrels.
Oh, wow.
So we've got the second largest in Manchester. Cloudwater's got like over 400. So it's quite a big gap between first and second. But
second place isn't bad.
We filled up another 8 barrels today and emptied another 6 or 8 barrels today. We think that's going to be future-proof for a little bit.
Right,
It's just a awful state of affairs for breweries at the moment, so we've just got to try and think clever.
How do you plan for a new year, especially when that new year kicks off with Dry January, which is, like you say, an absolute and utter nightmare for brewers these days?
Well, I think we see a lot more shifty bottle shops in January, and it's something that I do enjoy quite, especially in the past couple of years, that people are going into their local bottle shop and kind of going, oh, what would you recommend? I'll get some non-alcoholic beers. I might get 1 or 2 special beers for when I finish Dry January. And I've seen that as a trend. So we do try and help out those guys as much as possible. I mean, like, some of our accounts will still be as busy all the way through January as they will be through December, but they're the exceptions. What we've done the past couple of years is just filled all our tanks with lager or barley wine.
Use that time wisely, yeah.
And then essentially have a couple of weeks to get everything looking the right way up in the brewery.
Do you think, because you're based in Manchester and obviously there's a massively vibrant craft scene, do you think as a brewery that helps you to be part of a really healthy community?
I certainly don't think it hinders. We all drink together. Guys from Squawk come round, the guys from ABC, the new brewery called Balance, which is just around the corner from us.
Yeah.
They're around all the time. They buy their key kegs off us. And the guys from ABC, we literally share a wall with Alphabet, and I'm 90% sure that most of the equipment in our brewery we've just slowly stolen from them over the course to 5 years. I just walk in with a 4-pack, and Andrew, who's the head brewer at ABC, goes, right, what do you want? And the guys from Cloudwater and Track, I mean, the best one was back in February, Marchy time. So I was sat there drinking with the guys from Squawk and the guys from Track, and we were talking about like what we've got coming out, and I went, oh, we've got a 4.1% gluten-free APA coming out next week. And to which Rosie from Squawk went, oh, that's funny, because next week we've got a 4.1% gluten-free APA coming out. To which Evie from Track went, we've got a 4.1% gluten-free APA. Much like, it is a competitive market, but the fact is that we're all mates and we're all in it together. I'd much rather see the guys at Track do well and the guys at Squawk do well than see them do badly. Seems to all be a little community. And I am scared going into the new year of what's going to happen to any one of them. But I think Manchester is blessed with, I think, probably the best brewing scene in the UK.
Well, you've got a lot of breweries. You've got a lot of people in the area who love to drink the beer as well, haven't you? That's what you've got.
Well, yeah, it's the second city. But yeah, we've got a huge city centre. The suburbs are always heaving.
Yeah.
We've got some incredible bars all within walking distance of each other. It's kind of funny, we get the guys up from London and they're complaining that, how do you get this number of bars all within like half a mile when they need to take like 2 tubes, a bus and an Uber ride to get from one to the other? And it's like, oh, just lucky, I suppose, mate.
So we've each had one of these birthday beers. Dave, hype or try?
Hype, 100%. Very easy decision.
Yeah, hype all the way from me as well. You see, now I'm thinking, should open another one and see, but this would lead to a very slippery slope, wouldn't it? So if people want to get hold of these birthday beers, they're available through you on your website for £29, was it?
But I would always encourage you to go to your local independent can retailer. We've dealt with so many across the country right now. I'm pretty sure you'll be able to get like at least a couple of them from your friendly local neighbourhood retailer. But if that fails, we do have them available on our web shop.
Well, that is just about it for episode 38 of Daft About Craft. Thank you very much indeed for listening to what we've had to say on this episode and throughout the whole year. Thanks for your support through 2022. Now, we will be back at some point during the festive season with our annual cheese and beer special, so watch out for that. And then we'll be back in January with a Brew To Me special, focusing on some smaller breweries you might not have heard of. But until then, from both myself and from Dave B, we wish you a very, very happy Christmas and a wonderful 2023.